It smelled like blood, salt, and someone else's adrenaline. I always know when death is late to a call. Floodlights were swinging on their cables, carving the rain into ribbons. The cranes rose like rusted vertebrae against a black sky, and the stacks of shipping containers, hummed with the leftover heat of the day, turned slick and treacherous by the storm. I cut the siren a block back, anonymous tips don't love attention, and rolled the ambulance into the shadow of a longshoreman bar whose neon sign sputtered in stubborn pink. "Dispatch, this is Night Medic 7, I said into the mic, voice flat. "Arrived at the anonymous Docks Sector C hearing gunfire. Please advise." Naomi came through with the kind of calm that says she's juggling 3 emergencies and an iced coffee. "Advise you don't get shot, Lucas." Bold suggestion. I killed the engine. "Any patrol units close?" 2 blocks, but they've got a domestic going sideways. "You're hot for at least 5 minutes. 5 minutes is forever when someone is leaking." I grabbed the trauma bag, shrugged into a rain shell, and checked my kit by memory. Tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, portable monitor, airway gear, the little vials of neutralizer that kept other people safe from the worst of me. The coat's hood snapped tight around my face. The first breath tasted of brine and iron. I slipped between container rows. The rain turned the concrete into glass. Somewhere ahead, a metal door slammed, a voice shouted, a shot cracked too close to my teeth. I crouched without thinking, and counted the echoes. 2 shooters, maybe 3, but the angles were wrong, the sound slapping back from steel walls. I hated this place. Too many blind corners. Too many places a body could vanish and be nothing but rumor. Another shot, then a muffled grunt and a thud. I pushed forward. Saving people isn't noble when you've done it long enough, it's just the next thing. You either move, or you drown. He was on the ground by a loading ramp, half under a coil of plastic sheeting that made him look like a discarded statue. Tactical vest, dark hair plastered to his forehead, rain beating on a face carved into lines that were too steady for panic. The bullet had punched a neat hole high in his left shoulder, the exit. Wound was either small or not there, which was its own conversation. His gun lay a foot away, safely aimed at a crate of bolts. "Hey," I said, already kneeling, gloved hands finding the wound. "Good news. Your shoulder wanted a new piercing." His lashes twitched. The eyes under them were darker than the sky, and too clear for someone losing blood. He clocked my kit in one sweep. Gloves, tourniquet, the battered stethoscope. The fact that I hadn't bothered to announce I was EMT and not law enforcement. "You... a cop?" he asked, voice a scrape. "Dental hygienist," I said. "Open wide." He almost smiled, then lost it to a hiss when I pressed gauze under the lip of the vest and cinched a makeshift pressure dressing. Warmth spilled into my gloves. The rain tried to wash it away. "Bullets lodged or it went through clean," I said. "Lucky angle. You still with me?" "Unfortunately. Live with it." I reached for the tourniquet, thought better of it. Distal pulses good, bleed controlled, and snapped the monitor to his finger. Drop in saturation. Pressure holding by pure stubbornness. I tilted his chin to check airway, and that's when it hit, his scent, even drowned. In salt and gunpowder cut clean through the rain like heat lightning. Alpha. Controlled. Disguised beneath the sterile tang of alcohol and the metallic edge of suppressed adrenaline. It lanced down my spine and lit up the parts of me I keep walled and chained. My nostrils flared before I could stop them. Reflex is a treacherous animal. He felt it. We both did. For a heartbeat the world shrank to breath on breath, the rain a far curtain, the dock a dream, and then my training slammed the door shut and threw the bolt. "Eyes up," I said, deliberately bored. "You faint. I charge extra." "Who are you?" he asked, not letting go of my face. "No one you need to send a thank you card to." I peeled his vest open enough to slide additional gauze. The edges of his dog tags cool against my knuckles. The name stamped there was an alias or a joke, Ezra, and the letters pressed a ghost into my skin. A shout ricocheted from the next lane of containers. The bad math of footsteps told me we weren't alone. I swayed, placing my body between him and the sound. The pistol by his hand looked heavy in the rain. "You able to move?" I asked. He twisted, teeth clenched. "Give me 30 seconds. You get 5. I grabbed his wrist, felt the tendon jump under my thumb, and shouldered him up to a half-sit. His scent flashed again, harder this time, the caged thunder of a grounded storm, and it met mine like 2 flints striking. If I'd been 19 and stupid, I would have drowned in it. I was not 19. I had learned to breathe through fire. My jacket pocket bumped the glass vial. I didn't take the neutralizer. Not yet. It makes me slow, and slow is how you die. I kept the lid on my own instincts by will alone, the corded muscle of it pulling tight along my ribs. Dispatch. Update. I whispered into the mic. I have a GSW male, conscious, shoulder wound, moving to unit under active threat. Naomi, copy. PD is a minute out. You're playing tag with ghosts, Lucas. Ghosts don't bleed, I said. He hooked 2 fingers under my sleeve and pushed himself up harder than I liked. Pain flared across his face, and left it sharper. Ambulance? Gift wrapped, I said. On your feet. We moved in a stagger that pretended to be a walk. The rain made the concrete sing. The container row spat us out into the open, and the ambulance crouched where I'd left it. White box turned pearl under the storm. A figure popped out from behind a pallet. Saw the gun in Ezra's holster, saw my hands, decided life choices were precious, and vanished into the dark. Friendly neighborhood, I said. You locals have great hospitality. He huffed something that wanted to be a laugh. Not local, obviously. I cracked the rear doors with my elbow, leveraged him inside, and guided him onto the cot, the springs complaining. The overhead lights flicked warm and clinical. The rain's noise dulled to a drumbeat on the roof. I cut the shirt, irrigated, packed. He watched me with the kind of patience you only get after someone has shaved you down to the bone and told you to grow back. Up close his self-control was a palpable heat, not domineering so much as deliberate. An alpha who built a prison and stood guard at his own door. He didn't ask my designation, bless him. We were both pretending I was just a medic. The scar along my clavicle itched under the soaked fabric, a phantom limb knowing its old chain. Arm numb? I asked. Tingling. Good. Means I hit the nerve block, not your ego. I snapped the tape. Check the pupils. You're lucky. That mean I get a sticker? Gold star, if you don't bleed on my cot. He tilted his head, eyes catching on my throat as the collar of my jacket shifted with the motion. The hood dripped. My mask had slipped down the bridge of my nose. I pushed it back with a wrist. His gaze flicked lower, snagged where the scar dragged white across tan skin, and disappeared under the shirt's edge. It's a small thing, barely wider than a thumb, but people trained to read bodies don't miss signals. His breath changed. Mine didn't. I wouldn't let it. He didn't say the word. He didn't have to. Metastructure of power lives in glances and pauses. We both let the moment move past us like a ship we didn't board. I set the 4, handed him the mouthpiece for oxygen just to give him something to do with his mouth, and clicked my mic again. Dispatch, moving with 1 to St. Bridget's through freight access, PD en route. Police are 2 minutes, Naomi cut in. Lucas, you're about to have an audience. Show's over. I slammed the rear doors, hopped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The diesel coughed and then complied. I took the long turn wide to keep him from bouncing, and the ambulance nosed into the rain with steady purpose. Protocol says you wait for PD, he said from the back, voice clearer. Protocol says a lot of things. I threaded through forklifts asleep like metal cattle. I prefer people who breathe. You are not registered with the city. You are very observant. I caught my reflection in the rear view, a pair of eyes that looked like they belonged to someone who slept more than I did. Try not to bleed on the good towels. I don't see any towels. Exactly. The radio crackled, Naomi again. Heads up, Night 7. Patrol's turning into your lane. Which lane? I asked, and took a quick left into the alley that ran behind the seafood market, the scent of fish guts briefly muscling past the iron and salt. Blue and red strobed somewhere out there, searching. I let them search. We wouldn't be found tonight. Lucas, Naomi said, tone dropping. You good? I glanced at the monitor. Pressure. Okay. Heart rate high but civilized. Oxygen climbing. My own pulse steadied like a drummer finding tempo. We're good. From the cot, he said softly. You didn't have to come in hot. I kept my eyes on the rain. I make a habit of doing things I don't have to. Doesn't seem safe. Safety is a rumor we tell ourselves to get to morning. Silence. Then the smallest reluctant sound that might have been approval. The road smoothed under the tires. The port receded behind us, the cranes dissolving into gray. Name? He asked. The way he said it wasn't about power. It was about anchoring, about knowing who hauled you out of the water. I opened my mouth to give him the one I use on forms. The lie caught on my tongue, heavy as the ring of a locked door. Rain ticked against the windshield in Morse code only the lonely can read. Lucas, I said finally, the real one. Even if I'd sheared off its last name years ago. Lucas, he repeated, tasting it like he meant to remember. Something in my chest did that complicated thing hope does when it realizes it's still alive. Sirens wailed somewhere far to our right, police finally arriving to write a report about empty docks in the rain. I turned onto the causeway, wheels hissing. A breath later, the cot's frame creaked. He'd shifted, the oxygen mouthpiece dangling from his fingers. Don't do that, I said. You'll make me look like I don't know what I'm doing. His eyes were closed now, lashes beaded. The lines of his mouth softened with the morphine's edge. He was almost under when he murmured it, careless and careful all at once. Harrow. The syllables hit like a flare grenade tossed into a dark room. My hands tightened on the wheel. The past is a clever animal, it learns new ways to find you. He blinked, focusing through the haze, like he was looking at a ghost he didn't believe in. But he's dead. The wipers dragged a clear path through rain, and the city opened in front of us. Hungry, bright, and full of people who would prefer their dead to stay buried. Get some rest, I said, voice steady. We've got work in the morning. I woke to the steady hum of a vent, and the antiseptic sting of a room that had seen too much hope scrubbed off the walls. Fluorescents buzzed like tame bees. Concrete sweated cold. Someone had taped a peeling poster about consent first protocols to a cinder block pillar, which told me two things: we were under a warehouse, and someone cared enough to pretend we were above ground. You back with me, hero? The medic's voice came from my left, dry, unhurried. A mask hid the bottom half of his face, but I'd have recognized the eyes in a riot. Quick, measuring. Too old for how young the rest of him looked. He wore nitrile gloves and a navy underscrub, sleeves pushed to the elbows. His movements were precise in a way you couldn't fake. Every gesture saved time he'd already wasted somewhere else. He checked the dressing on my shoulder and made a low sound that wasn't quite approval. You've got the classic hero wound, he said. Now all we need is a plot where anyone was expecting you. Was there a plot? My voice sounded like wet gravel. There was rain and bullets, the rest is negotiable. He lifted my arm, watched my face as he palpated the muscles. The pain was clean and present. Can you make a fist? I did. He nodded, taped me up tighter, then peeled his gaze away like it didn't cost him anything. The room was long enough for 3 cots and short enough to make arguments personal. Medical supplies lived in labeled bins, repurposed from a defunct shipping company. The concrete floor had been painted once, industrial blue, and had long ago surrendered to shoe grit and bottle caps. A kettle perched on a hot plate. Next to it, a dented thermos. I forced the fog back. Name? That's usually my line. He adjusted the sling, then picked up a pen and wrote something efficient on a chart that wasn't official enough for city records. Your name, I clarified. He looked at me over the mask. His hair, short and damp from a recent shower, tried to curl where it shouldn't. Close, I could see the constellation of sleep loss around his eyes. Call me Luke. Not what he'd said in the ambulance. Not what my memory, traitor that it is, had tried to give me. Luke, I repeated, filing the lie where I could see it later. I owe Luke a thank you. You can pay me by not lifting anything heavier than your temper. He snapped his gloves off properly, a practiced tug and roll, tossed them in the biohazard bin, and washed his hands until the skin went pink. The scent of disinfectant climbed over the metal in the air. The mic on the desk burred to life before I could lean into more questions. Night 7. Check in. Naomi's voice rode the static with lazy competence. How's our stray wolf? Housebroken, Luke answered without turning. He won't be marking anything for at least a week. Wow, Naomi said. So much dignity in one sentence. Put me on speaker. Luke hit a button. The room filled with her smile. You two sound like a divorce on live radio. We've only known each other an hour, Luke said. We're not ready for court. Good. Saves me paperwork. Ezra, you alive? I could see the radio from where I lay. I didn't remember telling Luke my name, which bothered me. Alive, I said. Thanks for the heads up on patrol. Please. You think I'm letting my favorite vigilante become evidence? Luke, he eat yet? Luke glanced at the kettle. He'll pretend he's not hungry, until I stop looking. Classic alpha move, Naomi said. I'll drop a plate when I finish babysitting a multi-car on 53rd, don't let him run drills. And Luke? Don't let him interrogate you. He thinks he's charming. Luke's eyes flicked back to me, amused. Copy. He clicked the channel down to private, and the room tucked itself in around us again. You're not registered with the city program, I said. The bandage tugged when I breathed. A reminder that pain was more honest than most people. Big accusations for a man on my cot. He poured hot water into 2 cracked mugs. Steam softened the edges of him. I'm an EMT, with a night schedule, and a short fuse for bureaucracy. You've been on scene at 3 of my evac routes in the last month, I said. You treat the ones we can't get to in time, the ones we don't have the right papers for. The off-books medic. He didn't deny it. He brought me a mug and left it within reach but not in my hand, as if to say I could have it when I decided I wanted it. The tea smelled like something green and cheap. The thermos, I noticed, was military issue. You run the routes, he said. Not a question. You had a spotter last night. Had. The word weighed more than it should. I set it down. Your timing was good. Don't worry, he said lightly. I make a habit of being inconvenient to people with guns. You also make a habit of leaving before law enforcement arrives. Occupational allergy. He rinsed a set of forceps with alcohol and laid them to dry. And you make a habit of stealing my patience from the jaws of paperwork. We all have hobbies. He kept a mask between us, but nothing about him was evasive. He moved like someone who had torn parts out of his life to make the rest run clean. When he reached for a stack of dressings, the hem of his scrub top lifted just enough to show the faint curve of scar tissue along his clavicle, before fabric concealed it again. Old instinct flickered and went out. I banked the heat the way you learn. To when you don't want to be a threat to anyone, least of all yourself. Luke, I said, tasting the lie to see if it would crack. You said it in the truck. Lucas. He went still. Then he gave a tiny shrug that could have been surrender or mockery. Truck was loud. And you don't like cops, I said. I don't like systems that call trafficking a complicated family matter. He picked up the chart again. Wrote something I couldn't read and probably didn't exist. I let the quiet hold. The hum of the vent filled the space where questions would have rusted. He did another set of checks, which would have read as perfunctory if not for the way his fingertips mapped pain and ignored everything else. When he finished, he finally sat on the metal stool like he'd remembered gravity. How many? I asked. His gaze ticked to mine. How many what? People. Off books. I don't count. He swallowed. And it cost him. Counting makes it feel like a quota. You saved them. I kept some of them breathing long enough for your roots to do their job. Under the fluorescent hum, something steadied between us, not exactly trust, not yet, but a willingness to share the same air. I could use you, I said. He exhaled a laugh that happened mostly in his eyes. Flattering. Officially. I set the cup down. Night operations. I can get you a stipend, equipment, safer channels. He tilted his head, not moving closer, just making me aware that he could. What's the catch, soldier? I'm not a soldier anymore. Then the program is your war. He studied me for a moment. What's the catch? You answer to me on runs. We coordinate. You don't vanish mid-transport because a patrol cruiser makes your skin itch. He pretended to consider it, but the battle was in the set of his shoulders, not his face. What if I say no? Then you'll still do what you do, and I'll still try to keep you from getting killed doing it. This makes both our jobs easier. The radio clicked and Naomi's sigh came through like she'd been holding it specifically for the moment the room got serious. Married couple energy off the charts, she said. Do it, Luke. He'll ruin your life with structure, and then you'll thank him. I don't do chains, Luke said to the air. Good, Naomi said. He can't afford them. Luke rubbed his thumb along the rim of his mug, thinking. The fluorescent lights made his mask glow like a halo someone had misplaced. Night runs, he said finally. I do medicine my way. We do consent first, I said. On everything. Including protocols. His eyes warmed. That a joke? A promise. He looked down at my sling, the tape that would itch in 20 minutes, the skin already pulling where it wanted to heal wrong. One screw up, he said. And I walk. Deal. He stood, as if making sure the agreement had weight, and tugged the mask down to sip the tea. The face beneath it wasn't beautiful, not in a way that made sense when you were sane and well rested. It was better than that. It was alive. Congratulations, he said. You have a medic until your first idiocy. After that, you're your own hero. Wouldn't have it any other way. The kettle clicked off by itself. Somewhere above us, a truck rolled past, shaking dust out of the air. The warehouse creaked the way old buildings do when they're keeping secrets. "Welcome to the program," I said. Lucas, pretended not to hear the name settle between us like a truth we didn't have to look at yet. He rose, tugging fresh gloves on again, and tapped the sling. "Try not to lift anything heavier than your ego for 48 hours, he said. "I'll pretend to be impressed." "Pretend hard," I told him. From the radio, Naomi's voice. "I'm bringing soup and a list of swear words we can't say on air. Don't start without me." Luke's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Copy, dispatch." He moved to the door and paused with his hand on the frame, the underground light cutting him into clean lines and shadow. "We start tonight," he said. "Tonight," I agreed. He vanished into the corridor. The room breathed out. I lay back against the pillow, stared at the cheap ceiling tile like it was a sky, and let the ache settle around the promise I'd just made. Above us, the city kept pretending it was safe. Below, we got ready to make liars of it. By midnight the rain had learned all my names and was practicing them on the windshield. The city smeared itself into neon, pink, sickly green, electric blue. Every color reflected twice on wet asphalt. Ezra rode shotgun, all angles and quiet. The kind of presence that made a cramped cab feel organized. The dispatch channel hissed with other people's emergencies, until Naomi's voice cut clean through. "Night 7, you're up. Tip from a neighbor about screams in a basement, boarding house on Jasper, no registered tenants, landlord is a ghost, my favorite." "Ezra, I sent you the parcel map." He glanced at his phone. "Rear alley, bulkhead door, windows painted black. Because nothing says innocent like dead windows," Naomi said. "PD is busy telling a raccoon it's not allowed to eat hot dogs from a cart. You've got 5 without a badge." "Copy," Ezra said. "Copy," I echoed, already turning onto Jasper, the ambulance a white blur sliding between puddles like an apology. The boarding house looked like a mouthful of bad teeth jammed between. A vape shop and a taro place that smelled convincingly of sage. The alley was a throat. Narrow, damp, and not built for good choices. Ezra reached behind the seat, tossed me a rain shell, and took the other for himself. We didn't talk about last night, or the name he'd almost fished out of my past in the truck. There would be time to not talk about it later too. "You take the cot," he said, eyes flicking to the bulkhead door at the end of the alley. "I sweep first." "Or," I said, shouldering the folded stretcher, "I do my job and you perform your hobby of getting in the way of bullets." "Compromise," he said. "We both do both." "Beautiful. Add that to the consent first poster." The bulkhead door had a padlock the size of my second heart. Ezra produced a pry bar from somewhere he'd certainly not acquired legally. Braced it, and the lock surrendered with a crack like bone under a boot. Stale air breathed up from the stairs. It smelled like mildew, fear, and the metallic bite of someone trying very hard not to cry. "Naomi," Ezra murmured into his mic. "We're making entry. Your funeral playlist better slap," she said. "I'm recording." We went down fast. The basement was a maze of storage cages and bad decisions. One bare bulb swung on its wire. Voices ahead, one coaxing, one cold. Ezra ghosted forward in a way that said training and ugly memories. I righted the stretcher and kept pace. Eyes cutting the space for places a teenager might be. We found him in the last cage, wrists zip-tied to a pipe. 17 maybe, a face built to smile, currently learning how to do anything but. His scent hit me through the mildew, sweet and sharp and panicked. Omega. He froze when he saw Ezra, then saw me and thawed just enough. "It's okay," I said, already dropping the stretcher and cutting the ties. "I'm Lucas. This is Ezra. We're the Let's Not Die Today committee." The man with the cold voice stepped out from behind a column then, broad and bored, like he was late to a meeting with his conscience. He had a knife, and a scent that said unregistered alpha, pretending to be in charge of his impulses. Ezra put himself between knife and kid without thinking. The playbook didn't even creak. "Walk away," Ezra said, not loud, not soft. "You won't like the ending." The guy smirked. "You think you're the biggest dog down here?" "I think," Ezra said, and somehow sounded almost polite, "you've mistaken hunger for teeth." He moved when the knife moved, caught the man's wrist in a grip that didn't need flourish, twisted, and the knife clanged on concrete. The alpha lunged for cheap dominance. Ezra redirected him into the cage door, with a clang that was going to live in my ears for an hour. I stepped past, because priorities, and slid an arm around the kid's back. "Hey, Sam." I didn't know his name, I just picked it up from the way he wore himself. He startled. "You're shaking because your body thinks it's a maraca. That's temporary." "Sam," he whispered, like I'd conjured it. "How?" "Trade secret." I cut the second tie. "Can you walk?" "I can fly," he said, and almost fell. I caught him. Behind me, Ezra let the man slide to the floor in a conscious, angry heap. He didn't posture, didn't snarl. He just breathed until breathing wasn't an argument anymore. I'd met alphas who filled space to be seen. Ezra took only what he needed to do the job. "Naomi," I said. "One rescued kid, one dropped fool, no visible friends." "Copy," she said. "PD is actually en route, they finished negotiating with the raccoon. You've got 3 minutes. We hauled Sam up the stairs in a choreography that felt rehearsed after 2 hours and a contract we hadn't signed. Rain kissed his face at the top, and he blinked like the sky had invented kindness just for him. "Ever ridden in an ambulance?" I asked. "Only in video games." "Great. This one has worse graphics but better snacks." We tumbled into the rig. I swung the door shut with a slam that made the whole box hum, and the storm became a drumming on the roof, a rhythm I could work to. Ezra took the rear bench, alert, and very obviously not bleeding. I got Sam on the cot, cut the zip tie marks out of his skin with antiseptic, and a soft touch I keep in my pocket for nights like this. "Pain anywhere? Dizziness?" On a scale from 1 to, "This is the end of music forever." 7, he said. "And I hate jazz." "Blasphemy," I said, taping gauze. "Naomi. Mark 1 for the cultural deficit pile. Adding it under, kids today," she said. "How's the bad guy?" "Unimpressed with consequences," Ezra said. Sam's eyes flicked to him, and then to me, the math of adults happening behind his pupils. "He settled on me like you do when you find a person who will turn the world in the right direction, just because they can." "I smelled you," he said, quiet. "Before you came in." "I get that a lot," I said, gentling the monitor clip onto his finger. "Industrial strength deodorant." He smiled, the shaky kind that leaves your ribs better for having watched it try. Rain ran in threads down the side windows. Neon from the tarot sign painted the inside of the box in witch colors. "Ezra," I said without thinking, like I'd been saying his name for years, "hand me the..." I turned for the tray and the collar of my scrub top dragged across my skin. The scar along my clavicle flashed white in the overhead light and then was gone, hidden. Again by fabric and posture and the discipline of pretending it wasn't there. Ezra's gaze snagged and held for a beat of time. He wasn't sloppy about it. He catalogued and then looked at my hands because that's where the work was. Still, the air shifted, tiny enough most people wouldn't notice. I notice everything that wants to be a cage. He asked it without ceremony. "Is that a mark?" It shouldn't have hit like a punch, but old ghosts are lean and good at distance. I met his eyes and let the overhead's buzz fill the half-second where memory tried to be louder than the present. "That's the past," I said, and my voice didn't wobble. "It doesn't heal." Something moved through him, anger that didn't know where to land, protective heat that didn't ask permission to exist. His scent flared before he strangled it, clean and contained, but it still struck my nerves like a thrown spark. My own instincts pricked and then folded, well-trained and surly. His hand curled into a fist on his thigh. Tendons cut a line up his wrist. He looked at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but at me, wrestling something too large to name in polite lighting. "Steady your breathing, hero," I said softly, sliding in 4 like none of this was happening. "The filters won't keep up in here." A muscle jumped in his jaw and then smoothed. He blew a breath out through his nose, counted 4, took another. The flare sank, not gone, but put away like a weapon you only draw when the rules die. Sam watched us like a kid watches adults decide whether the world is safe tonight or later. "Are you two, like, a team?" he asked. Ezra answered before I could tilt the shape of the truth. "We're working on it." "Cool," Sam said, and meant it. He looked at me. "You smell like mint and something that hurts." "Most of my good habits hurt," I said. "This one, at least, has tea." I taped his line and glanced at the monitor, numbers climbing toward civilized. Ezra shifted, the bench creaking. The siren whooped once as if to remind us it existed. The city answered with 100 reflections. "PD 2 blocks out," Naomi said. "You've got a clear lane to St. Bridget's if you want it." "We want it," Ezra said. "Tell the raccoon I'm proud," I added. The ambulance rolled forward, a steady animal in a neon storm. Sam's eyes drooped, the kind of exhaustion that does a person like a favor. Ezra braced one knee against the cot's wheel so it wouldn't rattle. The move was small and stupidly gentle. I checked Sam's pupils one more time and then let myself lean back against the cabinet. The scar at my clavicle throbbed in weather-predicting sympathy. I touched it once, lightly, a ritual to keep the past in its glass box. Ezra didn't pretend he hadn't seen. He didn't ask again. He just kept breathing like I'd told him, in and out, measured, a tide you could build a harbor on. Outside, the city's colors bled together, and the road to the hospital made itself available. We took it. The third time I caught the same car idling across from my building, I decided paranoia had earned a tip jar. It was the cheap kind of surveillance, wrong tint, wrong patience. The driver never smoked, never scrolled. Just stared at the nowhere. In front of him like he'd been told that's what watching looked like. I stood behind my kitchen curtain with the kettle clicking tiredly on the hot plate and counted the seconds between his blinks. People who belong somewhere blink like they have somewhere to be. I texted Naomi a photo. She sent back a raccoon in a trench coat. Ezra didn't text. He knocked. The hallway smelled like old paint and somebody's burnt toast. I cracked the door on the chain and found him filling the frame, rain on his shoulders. His hair darker and more unruly without the discipline of a mission. He held up a paper cup like it was contraband. Peace offering, he said. It's technically coffee. Technically, I repeated, and let him in. My apartment was the opposite of impressive. A narrow room with a futon that admitted it was a futon, one window, a two-burner stove that resented heat, and a metal shelf crammed with medical supplies that had expired for everyone but me. Antiseptic lived in the air with the tired smell of my rug. The only decoration was a thumbtacked printout of a consent-first protocol chart. Naomi had given it to me as a joke. I kept it like a promise. Your downstairs neighbor plays the same 3 notes on a keyboard, Ezra said, stepping around a drying rack and the stubborn plant on the sill. Badly. It's how I know I'm home. I locked the door, checked the chain again. His eyes followed the routine and didn't comment. He put the cup on the counter. You have a tail. I noticed, I said, because if we were going to do honesty, it had to start somewhere less romantic than my death. He's worse at it than the last 2. Which means he's bait, or budget. Ezra moved to the window and took in the street with a glance that pressed it into a usable diagram. Domes do budget. Hunters do bait. Which are we worrying about tonight? Both, he said. And turned back to me. I hadn't put the mask on. I realized it at the same moment he did. For once, there wasn't a siren or a bleeding stranger to stand between us. Just the warm cone of the lamp over the sink, the smell of cheap coffee, and the antiseptic that clung to me like a second skin. His gaze settled. Not invasive, just present. I felt the old reflex twitch, hide, mock, deflect. But I was tired of being a haunted house. You can look, I said, before the shyness could grow teeth. He didn't step closer. He didn't step back. Ezra did the rarest thing in a city that loves performance. He waited like patience was a language. I hooked 2 fingers under the collar of my shirt and pulled the fabric aside. The scar along my clavicle had faded to a pale, stubborn line as if someone had tried to erase a sentence and left the grammar behind. It's not pretty. It's not meant to be. He took it in with the same care he gave a room, mapping edges, checking exits, finding the safest way to touch without touching. Who did it? He asked. Voice level. I did. My mouth was dry. I found the sink, turned the tap, turned it off again. Better pain than a lifetime brand. The words landed between us like something heavy and useful. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask why I hadn't chosen a gentler rebellion, or whether I regretted the cost. He didn't reach for me, and I didn't have to pull away. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the clean cold he wore like armor. It wasn't warm exactly. It was human. You stayed alive, and that's enough. It shouldn't have hit like mercy. It did. People say a lot of pretty things about freedom and dignity. They're generous with abstractions because they're cheap. Enough is not cheap. Enough buys a night of sleep. I breathed. The room seemed to take a breath with me, the lamp hum settling into something less sharp. The coffee smell leaned in like a friend who doesn't hug. I could hear the downstairs neighbor find a 4th note, and abandon it for the comfort of the original 3. He looked away first, not out of discomfort but respect, giving me back the privacy he'd never taken. He picked up the paper cup, sipped, grimaced. This is a crime. I plead guilty, I said, and my voice didn't shake. I was going to brew something real. Let me, he said. You cook coffee? I make heated water slightly less disappointing. He set about it with a soldier's neatness, rinsing the kettle, finding the bag, measuring without making it a ceremony. The little acts of care you learn when there aren't many to choose from. We stood like that for a minute. Two strangers pretending a kitchen could be a refuge. I watched him watch the window's reflection in the kettle. He'd angled it to use as a mirror for the street. Cautious. Clever. Lived. Your tail? He said. Still there, I said. Blinking like someone told him it was part of the job. House rules, Ezra said. You don't leave alone while he's parked. I'll rotate a friend to the corner. Friends? I collect them like parking tickets. Expensive hobby. Mine tend to pay back. He poured the coffee into 2 chipped mugs. We didn't toast. We didn't need to consecrate the obvious. Lucas, he said, and the name didn't snag this time. If you want me to file a formal notice with domes, I can. It'll paint a target and a halo. I don't look good in halos, I said. Targets clash with everything. Then we'll do it quiet. He set his mug down, the ceramic a soft tick against the counter. But you call me before you call anyone else. If you even think someone's in your shadow, I get the first look. You like rules, I said. I like you alive. He didn't realize how gently he'd said it until the words were already part of the room. We both heard them. Neither of us ran. The kettle clicked as if to mark time. My scar pulsed in the same old weather pattern, a ghost barometer with only one forecast. I could feel the past testing the windows, looking for a loose latch. He had given me a sentence to hold it back with. He probably didn't know that. He'd said, alive, not free. But I heard the same thing. He finished his coffee even though it was bad. He checked the street again, shifted to the angle that let him scan without seeming to. I'll walk you to the clinic, he said. I can handle the 2 blocks. I know. He glanced at the scar, then met my eyes. Humor me. On one condition, I said. Name it. You stop pretending you're not cold and take my jacket. He opened his mouth to argue and then didn't. Deal. I handed him the jacket. He slipped into it like a man allergic to being cared for and willing to risk hives. We stood in the doorway while I locked up, the warm light at our backs, the antiseptic and coffee trying hard to be a home. Ready? He asked. As I ever am. We stepped into the hall, into the building's stale breath and the far-off mutter of the street. Somewhere outside, the car idled, waiting for instructions from a voice that had never learned the word enough. I had it now. I carried it like something fragile and sharp. We went to meet the night together. The night we learned what my body could do, the storm forgot how to be weather and tried on the shape of war. It started with the lights. The underground clinic's fluorescence blinked in a jittery Morse, then steadied. Then went out like someone pinched the world between 2 fingers. The generator coughed awake a heartbeat later, painting everything in a thin yellow that made even bandages look bruised. Naomi's voice cracked over the radio mid-sentence. Copy. Bring extra, and then cut to static sharp enough to taste. Ezra was at the door before the second breath. We're about to have company, he said, already slotting fresh mags into his vest. His calm narrowed to a blade. He didn't posture. He stacked the room, kids farther back, staff behind the rolling cabinets. Me in the middle with the cart like a shield that could also stitch. Who? I asked. The question felt stupid and necessary. Wrong kind of alpha, he said. 2 at least. Maybe 3. That meant the ones who showed their teeth for sport. The ones who believed the words pack law could excuse anything. I checked my cart, hemostatics, intubation kit, adrenaline, 4S, and in the breast pocket. The small brown vial that kept me from being a hazard when the world got loud. The neutralizer. I patted it like it could lie for me again. Footsteps, on the stairs. A door slamming somewhere above. Someone's breath turning to glass beside the triage curtain. I found Naoki, an Omega mom whose kid had a stitched eyebrow and too much bravado, and pressed a palm to her shoulder. Back wall, I said. Hands on the little one's ears. Do not let go. She nodded like she'd swallow fire if I asked. The clinic door shook once, then again, then gave up the ghost. 3 men came through the splinter with a confidence that had read as farce under better lighting. 2 alphas in front. 1 beta with a phone camera angling for proof of righteousness. The first alpha announced himself with a scent like cheap dominance and expensive cologne. The second. was flat, unstable, the chemical tang of someone who had used suppressants wrong for too long. "Where is he?" the first one said, scanning faces like we were inventory. "Wrong facility," Ezra said mildly. He didn't raise his weapon so much as let it be the truth in the room. "You can leave." "We're exercising right of retrieval," the man said, pronouncing the words like he'd learned them phonetically. "No," Ezra said. "You're trespassing in a medical shelter." The beta raised the phone. "Keep talking." I saw the way the second alpha's pupils blew wide. His hands opened and closed like he'd lost a rhythm only he could hear. His gaze snagged on Naoki's kid, then skittered to me, hungry without appetite. The room tightened. My pulse found my throat. The vial in my pocket felt like a decision I didn't have time to dignify. Neutralizer bought other people clean air, at the cost of drowning me in cotton. If they rushed us, we'd need me fast. Ezra's shoulder brushed mine. A fraction of a second. A plan passing between bodies without words. He would take the first 2 hits and still stand. I would keep people breathing. We would try not to lose anyone to anyone. The second alpha took a step too far into the room. "Stop," Ezra said. He didn't. The first muscle in his jaw jumped. The second twitched. He inhaled, and the room inhaled with him. And every instinct I kept caged lifted its head. I took the vial out of my pocket and set it on the counter. "Lucas," Ezra said, a warning and a promise. "I know," I said. "Cover." He did. I pulled the mask down, hooked 2 fingers under my collarbone, pressed hard where the scar lay like a sentence I'd written myself, and exhaled the way you do when you're about to surface from too deep. The air changed. Scent is a language even people who pretend not to speak it understand. Mine unspooled into the room like a chord struck too pure for cheap ears. Mint and metal, rain on old stone, the sharp ozone of a storm meeting salt. It carried the memory of resistance and the aftertaste of pain. It said no in a voice that called things home. The first alpha flinched like a hand had touched his throat without touching. The second staggered, his posture breaking, pupils flickering as instinct threw up both hands. Behind them, the beta's phone dipped, as if the lens couldn't hold the focus. "Stand down," Ezra said, voice low. His scent didn't surge. He kept his discipline like armor. The second alpha's breath hitched, chased itself, lost. The suppressants in his system panicked under the pressure of what I was asking the air to do, and his aggression flipped to confusion. He blinked, a man waking in a house he didn't remember buying. "It's okay," I said, soft as gauze. "There's nothing to fight. Your lungs know how to breathe without your permission." He swayed. His hands opened and stayed open. The first alpha tried to rally. Authority is a greedy habit. He reached for a surge that wasn't there. Found only the weight of what I'd poured into the room and ground to a halt like a car in sand. "You're interfering with," he began. "With your bad night?" I said. "Plead the fifth." He took a step. Ezra matched and took one of his own, and the space between them said, "This ends badly for you," in exactly the number of syllables it needed. The man did the math and decided to survive. Behind them, the phone trembled. The beta, sweating, looked from Ezra to me, and then, stupidly, at Naoki's kid, as if the smallest person in the room might give him permission to keep filming. The kid stuck his tongue out with great dignity. I could have hugged him. "Out," Ezra said. The first alpha turned on the second. "Move." They did, on legs that didn't love them. They backed out of the room because turning their backs would have meant admitting they were relieved. The door scraped shut against the ruined latch. For a blink, the only sound was the generator's uneven heart. I realized I was shaking when the vial on the counter chimed against the metal from the tremor in my hand. Ezra's eyes were on me, steady, and very, very present. He hadn't looked frightened during the worst of it. He did now, a little. Not of them. Of what it had cost. His nostrils flared once, a reflex, then closed like he'd taught them manners. "You okay?" he asked. "Define okay," I said, and tried on a smile that had no business in this lighting. He holstered his weapon, the movement precise enough to make the space feel less like a held breath. Around us, the room exhaled in pieces. Naoki's shoulders easing, the kid's hand unclenching, the staff remembering how to chatter. Someone started laughing and cut it off halfway like laughter might shatter the new fragile calm. Ezra crossed to me the way you cross thin ice. Confident without arrogance. He didn't touch my shoulder. He reached past me and turned the neutralizer vial so the label faced us both, like a rebuke and a trophy. "You didn't take it," he said. Not accusation. "If I had," I said and swallowed, "I would have drowned. We all would have." Something like pride flickered, and was strangled by a more complicated thing. He studied my face the way you study someone else's scars, cataloging facts, not doubts. "What you did back there was a parlor trick with bad side effects." The adrenaline dump hit then, mean and fast. My knees tried to write checks pride couldn't cash. Ezra's hand hovered, the offer a warm gravity I almost fell into. I let my shoulder touch the cabinet instead. "It's not a trick," he said carefully. "It's broken," I said. The word came too quick. "It's broken, Ezra." The generator flickered. The light took a breath to decide whether it belonged here. He didn't contest the word. He only found the boundary, then stepped up to its edge and stood there with me. "Sit," he said. I sat because the floor had an argument I didn't want to lose. He slid down beside me, back to the cabinet, our elbows almost touching. The room continued to remember how to be a room. Naomi's voice, delayed and filled with static, finally stumbled back through the speaker. "You two better not be dead. I'm not doing your paperwork." "Alive," Ezra said into the clipped mic on his vest, not taking his eyes off me. "Situation resolved." "Define resolved," Naomi said. "Everyone breathing," he said. "Show-offs," she muttered, relief like a smile. We didn't talk for a while. Talking would have named things I wasn't ready to feed. We sat in the hum. My hands trembled in little aftershocks, the kind that take longer to leave than the big ones. Ezra set his palm down on the floor between us, not touching, just present, steady as a metronome. He shifted a fraction, and the air moved with him. Our faces tilted without coordination. There was a world where we closed that distance and pretended it was a way to say thank you, or sorry, or please don't die in rooms I can't reach. It got close enough to taste. I turned my head and let the almost be almost. "I can't," I said. The words sandpapered my throat. "I'm dangerous." "For who?" "For everyone." He held the line with one sentence. "I'm not everyone." It landed like a small clean fire in a cold room. We stayed where we were, two shapes cut out of one bad night, until the generator. His light steadied and the clinic sounded like a place that had always been safe. Our shoulders didn't touch. Our hands shook anyway. The storm finally lost interest by dawn, leaving the city wrapped in fog and apology. The generator still hummed below, but the clinic was sleeping, the kind of exhausted, grateful sleep that only comes after surviving. Ezra found me on the roof. I'd brought the thermos up there because the air felt cleaner when it could move, and I needed something warm that wasn't adrenaline. The city stretched around us, half hidden under a gray sky, its lights blinking like they were embarrassed to still be on. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, climbing through the hatch. "I tried," I said, unscrewing the lid of the thermos. My brain filed a complaint. He settled beside me, elbows on knees, the skyline reflected in his eyes. His movements were slower than usual, deliberate. You could tell when someone's body was recalculating what safe meant. We drank in silence for a while. The tea tasted faintly of metal, the way every thermos drink eventually does, but it was hot, and that was enough. Below us the streets glittered with puddles and broken reflections. I thought about the men who'd come through the door, their faces twisted by instincts they couldn't master. Then I thought about mine. "I used to believe," I said finally, "that meeting was just a thing that happened to other people, like taxes or weather." Ezra tilted his head, waiting. He didn't prod. He never did. "My family was old blood," I continued. "The kind that keeps records of everything except mercy. They called it heritage. I called it captivity. The words came easier up here, where wind could take them if they got too heavy. When I was 8, they brought in an alpha from another house. The ceremony was supposed to be symbolic. Political alliance, strength of unity, all that. I didn't understand half the words. I just knew everyone smiled too wide. I rubbed a thumb along the ridge of the thermos cap. Afterward, I looked down at the mark and realized my name didn't belong to me anymore. I waited 6 years before I did something about it. One night, when they sent me for training, I used the blade they'd given me for sutures. Took back what they'd taken. It wasn't brave, it was just necessary. He didn't fill the silence. Just listened. The way you only can when you've buried your own ghosts. "I ran," I said. "Changed names. Learned medicine because someone once told me healing is the opposite of ownership. Turns out they were wrong, it's messier. But it's something." When I looked over, He was watching the horizon, hands clasped, a frown that wasn't anger but memory. "There was a girl," he said after a moment. 18. Omega, government witness. We were supposed to get her out before the raid. He didn't look at me while he spoke, and I didn't interrupt. "She trusted me," he said simply. "I told her to run left. I should have said right. The roof caved in before I got there." He exhaled, and it came out raw. "I kept telling myself it was the building's fault, the intel's fault, anyone's fault but mine. But the thing about being alpha is, blame has a magnetic field. It always finds you." The wind pressed against us, cool and clean. I poured him more tea. He took it with a quiet nod. "For what it's worth," I said, "she'd have trusted you either way." "That's not comfort," he said. "It wasn't meant to be." That got the faintest tug of a smile from him. Quick, crooked, real. We sat like that for a long while, two silhouettes against a bruised sky. The city didn't care we existed, and maybe that was the mercy of it. For a few minutes, nothing chased us. He broke the quiet first. "You ever think about going back?" "Only when I want to ruin a perfectly good mood. Then I'll stop asking." "Good plan." I raised the thermos and offered it to him. "Drink before it gets cold." He took a careful sip, made a face, and coughed. "You drink tea like a hangman." I grinned. I try to keep up appearances. That pulled a low laugh from him, the kind that found warmth even in exhaustion. We stayed there until the fog thinned and the first streaks of morning light painted the water towers gold. The world felt temporary, fragile, and somehow generous, like it might let us borrow peace for a little while longer. For the first time in a long time I didn't mind the silence. It sounded like living. The job came in through Naomi's channel just after sunset. Her tone had that careful cheer she used when she knew she was about to send us somewhere ugly. "Pick up on 15th and Morgan. Teen Omega, untagged, under surveillance. Family already gone to ground. You two are the only clean unit in range." "Define clean," I said. "Still breathing," she answered. "That counts. Ezra, you drive. Lucas, pack light." So we went. The ambulance ate the city in amber streaks and siren echoes. Neon signs flickered across Ezra's face. Reds, greens, the ghost of a blue. He drove like someone who'd learned precision in tight corners, hand steady on the wheel, eyes half a block ahead of the headlights. Our silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was choreography. When we reached the apartment complex, the lights on the third floor were flickering in the wrong rhythm. Ezra's jaw set. "That's our window." I grabbed the med bag. "You're up first." He gave me a look. "You think I'm letting you go in first?" "I patch you punch. We've done this dance. Don't get sentimental about our dance." We split up anyway. Me through the main hall, Ezra taking the fire escape. Inside, the stairwell smelled of boiled cabbage and fear. Someone's TV murmured through a wall, canned laughter, offbeat applause. The door to apartment 3B was cracked open. A boy's voice came from inside, thin and shaking. "Please. I don't want to go." That was all the invitation I needed. I pushed through. Two men in plain clothes, no insignia. Mercs hired to retrieve assets. The Omega boy was cornered near the sink, wrists already marked with tape burns. 16 maybe. Eyes wide. Scent sour with panic. "EMs," I said, stepping in like it was a routine call. "We got an emergency." "Congratulations, you're it." One of them turned, half sneer, half confusion. Ezra appeared behind him like punctuation. A shove, a twist, a thud. The second man lunged. I swung the med bag hard enough to make my shoulder regret it later. He dropped. The kid flinched, but didn't scream. "Hey," I said, voice gentler. "You okay?" He blinked. "You're not with them?" "Nope, we're the opposite of them. That's Ezra. He does the glowering. I do the first aid." Ezra was already cuffing the mercs with plastic ties from his pocket. Movements efficient, silent. 5 minutes before anyone comes looking. I nodded, and crouched in front of the boy. His pulse jumped like it wanted out. "What's your name?" "Call me whatever," he whispered. "Everyone else does." "Okay, whatever." I smiled. "You're bleeding. Hold still." He gave a shaky laugh. "It's Sam," he said. "Good choice," I said, and pressed the antiseptic pad to his wrist. He hissed, but didn't pull away. We moved fast after that. Ezra securing the hallway, me guiding Sam through the shadows. When we reached the stairwell, Naomi's voice broke in again. PD en route, 2 blocks out. You have 90 seconds before uniforms and questions. Copy, Ezra said. Also, Naomi added dryly, you two argue less on open comms. If you get quiet, I'll assume one of you's dead. I rolled my eyes. Duly noted. Mom, don't make me ground you. By the time we hit street level, the ambulance's back doors were open. The city was a smear of light and noise, the night air thick with rain that hadn't yet decided to fall. Ezra boosted Sam inside, shut the doors, and took the wheel. Inside the box, the hum of the engine was steady. Sam looked from me to the window, then back. Are you two, like, a couple? The question hit like an unexpected speed bump. I dropped the gauze roll. Ezra coughed loud enough to drown an awkward silence. No, I said, too fast. Definitely not, Ezra said at the same time. Sam grinned. All teenage mischief suddenly returned to his bones. Okay. Just checking. Naomi's laughter cracked through the radio. God, if you two ever stop denying it, warn me. I'd like time to retire. Focus, dispatch, Ezra said dryly. I am focused, she said. Focused on your denial. Ezra switched off the radio. Sam watched him, amused. You fight a lot. It's how we communicate, I said, taping the last dressing. Ezra's voice drifted from the cab. Keeps us awake. Sure, Sam said softly. You work good together. I looked toward the partition. Ezra's silhouette was outlined in dashboard light, sharp, calm, the kind of steady that had its own gravity. Yeah, I murmured. We do. The siren wailed once to clear an intersection, then quieted. The rhythm of the city outside matched the beat of the road beneath us. Pavement, rain, breath, repeat. When we pulled into the safe zone, Sam was half asleep, hands still wrapped in gauze. Ezra parked, killed the lights and turned to me. The cab was dim, washed in the blue of street lamps. Good work, he said. Same to you, I replied. We sat there for a moment longer than necessary. The hum of the engine, the only sound. Then our eyes met. Brief, quiet, enough. The world outside went on spinning, loud and endless. Inside, for a heartbeat, everything was still. The day Kai walked into the program office, the air decided to be winter. Our headquarters was a second-floor suite over a pawn shop, all bad carpet and good intentions. The front room held 2 desks that resented work, a corkboard webbed, with yarn and court dates, and a coffee maker that brewed anxiety. Naomi had taped a sign above it, please don't feed the lawyers, and someone had underlined don't 3 times. The window AC rattled like it was chewing nails. I was logging supply orders, pretending not to count how many vials of neutralizer. We had left, when the bell over the door did a little helpless jingle. He didn't belong to the room. He brought his own. Kai Harrow was dressed like money that had learned manners. Charcoal suit, a tie the color of old wine, pocket square folded with a surgeon's precision. He was handsome the way cliff faces are handsome. You admire them until you remember what falling feels like. His scent was cool and curated, a polished mirror over sharp metal. Good afternoon, he said, voice made for boardrooms and verdicts. I'm looking for Lucas. He knew not to add the last name. Courtesy, or a flourish with a buried blade. Ezra came out of the back room like he'd felt a pressure change. He didn't bristle. He didn't need to. He just inserted himself between me and the door with the kind of ease that says habit, not show. You found the wrong office, Ezra said. We don't do purebreds. A smile touched Kai's mouth and didn't warm anything. Humor. I admire that in a community initiative. Naomi's chair rolled up beside him. Her head set a crooked halo. You lost? She asked. All sugar. We're out of leashes. Dispatch, Ezra said without looking, and the single word was a hand at her elbow. She clicked her chair back a safe inch and pretended to find something extremely important on her screen. Kai's eyes landed on me with the tiny surprise of someone recognizing a painting they grew up with, now hung off level. Lucas. He tasted the syllables like they might still obey him. You're hard to locate. I practice, I said. My mouth was dry. The scar at my clavicle itched under cotton. He produced a slim folder and set it on the counter like communion. Inside, the paper was thick enough to be armor. He slid a page free with 2 fingers. House Harrow has filed a notice of missing assets with the city dome. Lucas Harrow is registered as absent property, presumed trafficked. We are here to correct the record. The room tilted and steadied. Even Naomi stopped breathing loud enough to hear it. Ezra didn't touch the document. He didn't need to. He's a person, he said. Not your resource. Kai's attention shifted to him with the small delight of a cat discovering a bird that speaks Latin. You must be Ezra. Your reputation has edges. Yours has teeth, Ezra said. Keep them to yourself. I am attempting to engage with the process. Kai steepled his fingers. Formally, the house has a duty to retrieve what is ours. Informally, I would prefer discretion. These people are spirited. He glanced at Naomi's corkboard, the corner of his mouth quirked. It would be a pity to interrupt their arts and crafts. I could feel the old gravity tug. Go quiet, go small, survive by being furniture. The instinct crouched, patient. It had long claws and my first name in its mouth. I took half a step toward the back hall anyway, a movement my body made without waiting for permission. Ezra's hand didn't close on me. It found the air in front of me, palm out, a door I could choose to open or lean against. If you walk out, he said softly enough that only I heard it, they win. He didn't mean the house. He meant every old rule that wore my voice from the inside. I breathed, and the breath went where it was supposed to. Kai watched the exchange with professional interest. We can do this civilly, he said. Sign the acknowledgement of stewardship, submit to medical evaluation, and we will reintroduce you into proper custody. There will be safeguards, comforts. The past can be mended. You brought stitches for a bone, I said, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. Poetry, he said approvingly. You always were a romantic. Your mother... Stop, I said. He did, not because I'd commanded him, but because Ezra had moved the breadth of a breath closer, and the room recalculated. Legally, Kai continued, crisp again, the dome recognizes house claims when the subject is a minor at the time of initial mark. And the mark remains extant. Courts are fond of continuity. The mark is not extant, I said. I wanted to press my fingers into the scar until words stopped happening. I removed it 12 years ago. Kai spread his hands. A regrettable act of self-harm. We have statements asserting coercion by outside parties. There are procedures for restoration. Naomi made a sound that contained 6 curse words and a stapler. Ezra's gaze stayed on Kai, but I could feel the check-in homing in my direction, silent as a hand on my shoulder. What do you actually want? I asked. Kai looked pleased. Now we discuss terms. Step back quietly, and I will persuade the house to refrain from pressing charges against your accomplices. The program avoids scrutiny, you avoid spectacle. We all keep the peace. Ezra's laugh was short and humorless. You want him to vanish without having to drag him? Kai's eyes glittered, honest for a heartbeat. Predator, polished. Dragging is vulgar. Besides, it inflames the press. Good, Naomi said brightly. I love a bonfire. Kai, I said. And let the name land like a coin on a table. Tell the house. I'm not your story anymore. Something moved under his posture, a small disappointed adjustment, like a violinist acknowledging a flubbed note. You think defiance is a personality, he said. And for the first time I heard the edge under his manners. It is posture, Lucas. It tires. Then sit down, I said. Ezra angled a fraction more in front of me, enough that his shoulder brushed my sleeve. The contact was white noise to anyone watching. To me, it was a line in the floor I wouldn't have to draw alone. You've delivered your notice, Ezra said. Now deliver yourself to the door. Kai considered refusing for the pleasure of it. He was good at reading rooms. Ours told him this would not be elegant. He picked up the folder, smoothed the paper as if it could bruise, and inclined his head. Old ritual in a place that had none. Very well. We will proceed legally. His gaze returned to me for a final pass, softer, almost rueful. Houses are patient, Lucas, and they remember. So do the people they call property, I said. He smiled like winter smiles, distant, immaculate. Until soon. He left. The bell jingled, painfully small. The door shut, and the office remembered how to breathe. I didn't realize my hands were shaking until the pen rolled out from between my fingers, clattering a confession against the desk. Ezra picked it up and set it beside the supply list like we were still living a normal afternoon. Naomi exhaled, pushed both hands through her hair, and said, Okay, who wants coffee? And by coffee I mean a legal strategy, and 6 panic muffins. Ezra didn't look away from me. We fight, he said. Not a question. If I run? They win, he said again. I nodded. The motion small and absolute. Outside the day looked ordinary. Inside we could all smell the storm building. A clean, cold pressure that meant the next move would be in front of cameras and law. The kind of weather you meet standing up. The room was built to make people small. City Hall NXB tried to look like a clinic. A row of folding screens, stainless. Instrument trays, a blood pressure cuff left careless on a chair. But the ceiling was too high, the air too cold, and the microphones on there. Black stems looked like a stand of thin-necked birds waiting to peck. Cameras crowded the back wall, red tally lights blinking like eyes that didn't blink. They called it a public hearing on Omega health and safety protocols. The agenda read like paperwork. The subtext read like a leash. Kai Harrow arrived a minute before start time, immaculate as ever, a gray suit that turned the fluorescent light into a flattering rumor. He greeted the committee chair by last name, shook hands with the dome's counsel, and took a seat at the table marked House Representative. His gaze found me and slid away, a professional morning. Ezra sat 2 chairs down from me at the program table, forearms on the table, posture relaxed enough to fool strangers. Naomi was behind us with a tablet and a mouthful of warnings she'd promised to swallow on camera. Marin, our attorney, leaned in on my right, the only person in the room whose blazer looked like it had survived an actual fight. She spoke without moving her lips. If anything touches your skin, you say no. If anyone says the word custody, I stand up. What if they say T? I asked. Then I really stand up. The chair called us to order. Words skated, docket numbers, committee authority, community concerns. Someone used stakeholders with a straight face. Then Kai stood smoothly, placed a folder on the lectern and said, in the matter of the Harrow House notice of missing assets, we request preliminary medical evaluation to confirm the subject's identity, welfare, and continuity of Mark. Marin was already half up. Objection. This isn't a probate court, and my client is not a subject. The chair smiled the way politicians smile at hurricanes. Miss Patel, we're not adjudicating ownership. The dome simply seeks to guarantee that no person is being trafficked. If Harrow's records indicate a minor marked and later disappeared. I didn't disappear, I said into the mic, surprised at how steady it came. I left. A murmur stirred the press like a wind through paper. The chair made a sympathetic hand. All we're asking is a wellness check to verify there's no coercion. Coercion, said the agenda. Continuity, said the suit. The tray beside the screen held cotton swabs and a scanner wand, the kind that read subdermal marks and proprietary tags. A tech in a white coat adjusted her gloves and didn't look at me. Lucas, Marin murmured. We can walk out. Ahead of me, Ezra didn't move. His stillness had gravity. What happens if we decline the check? He asked, voice carrying. Kai looked regretful. We'd file for provisional stewardship to ensure medical needs are met, short term. For everyone's protection. Naomi's whispered curse could have made new paint peel. I felt the old tug. The instinct to fold, to make myself a smaller target. I set my palms on the table and let my fingers feel the grain. Wood remembers pressure and heat. It keeps shape better than most people. Mr. Lucas, the chair said gently, please join the clinician behind the screen. Don't, Marin breathed. I stood up. Ezra's hand didn't grab me. It rose enough to brush air near my sleeve. The motion landed in my ribs like a sentence. Your choice. I'm here. I went to the screen because running had teeth too. The clinician held the scanner like a polite question. If you'll just lift your collar, she said. I did. Then took another breath and hooked 2 fingers, pulling the shirt aside. Enough to bare the thin, pale ridge that had been my first act of ownership. The room exhaled. Cameras leaned forward. This will confirm removal, the clinician said, professional and kind. She raised the wand, its tip haloed faintly blue. I stepped back. No. A ripple. The chair frowned. We can't conclude welfare if you refuse a non-invasive. I know what welfare is, I said, keeping my voice level. It isn't being scanned so a house can argue over me better. Lucas, Kai said, soft as silk. Let us help you. I turned, stepped away from the screen so the room could see, and let the fabric fall so the scar caught the lights full on. This isn't a thing, I said, and my throat didn't close. This is me. The silence that followed had a taste. Ozone before lightning. Then Ezra's chair scraped once as he stood. The sound made every camera on the back wall swing like sunflowers toward a sun. He didn't go to the lectern. He didn't petition the chair. He walked into the center space between the tables where they'd placed a rubber mat as if anticipating spill. He planted his boots. When he spoke, His voice carried like it had been practicing for this exact room, and would tolerate no lesser space. "He's free," Ezra said. "No throat clearing, no legalese. He is here by his choice, and he will leave by his choice. If you want to evaluate anything, evaluate whether the house should be using medical to mean possession." Kai blinked. "Almost delicate. This is unhelpful rhetoric." "Helpful is a building with locks that open from the inside," Ezra said. A couple of reporters forgot to pretend to be furniture and leaned in. Someone's pen skated. The chair lifted a hand. "Mr. Reed." "Ezra will do," he said. "And we're done pretending this is about health. If the dome wants to see coercion, I invite it to watch a house demand a scan of a scar for the sake of resuming stewardship." A red tally light snapped on hard. Naomi's tablet vibrated against the back of my chair, text from her to Marin. "You've got 3 feeds live. Use it." Marin stood then, all courtroom spine. "For the record, my client rejects any claim that he is an asset, missing or otherwise. He has rescinded any mark placed upon him as a minor, and any attempt to restore recreation or remarking constitutes assault under Dome Criminal Code and violation of international human rights statutes to which this city is a signatory." The chair's smile grew painful. "Ms. Patel." "Furthermore," Marin said, rolling, "House Harrow's petition relies on documents that list him as property. I move to admit those records as Exhibit A to a parallel action, human trafficking with color of law." That did it. The press moved as one organism. The word trafficking turned cameras carnivorous. Kai's mask didn't slip so much as blanch elegantly. "This is a distortion." "Is it?" Marin cocked her head. "You can explain to Judge Rivera why your notice of missing assets describes my client's removal of a mark as willful damage to proprietary seal. I'm sure the court will enjoy the semantics." The chair tried to bang a gavel over microphones that were no longer listening. "This forum is not where you get to launder slavery," Naomi said just loud enough to be picked up by the wrong mic. She covered her mouth in faux horror. Too late. Security shifted by the doors, uncertain about what justified intervention when the public had become the court. The clinician behind the screen lowered her wand, met my eyes and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Kai exhaled. The first crack showed. He glanced at me as if to say this was not the plan. And in that instant, I believed him. "Houses prefer velvet to blood. Bloodstains." He straightened. "Lucas," he said, pitch lowered for me and the nearest camera. "You are making this more painful than it needs to be." I could feel the scar warming where the fabric touched old nerve. I stood where Ezra had stood, and let my feet learn the floor. "Pain was the point," I said. "Better that than life spent quiet." Ezra's presence arrived like a change in weather, beside me, not in front. We made a line without touching. He didn't look at me when he spoke to the room again. "His choice is not a spectacle. It's a boundary. We are not asking your permission to draw it." Kai closed his folder with a crisp snap. "Very well," he said. And for the first time there was bare hunger in it. "We will see you in court." "Please do," Marin said. "I've been saving my good blazer." The chair, desperate to reassert ritual, declared the session adjourned. It didn't matter. The cameras were already writing their own minutes. Reporters shouted questions that were not questions. Security ushered, and the gathered faces broke into 100 vectors of gossip and power. We walked out together. The hallway smelled like too many bodies, too much perfume, the hot metal of lights. Someone jostled my arm. Ezra's hand hovered, didn't land. We didn't speak until we hit air. Outside, the sky had recovered its color. Hard blue over the courthouse steps. Wind scoured the heat from my face. Naomi barreled out behind us, hair a storm. "We got it," she said, a grin she couldn't help. 3 angles, full audio. Dome counsel looking like they swallowed a lemon. "Marin's motion is going to sing." Marin caught up, breathless and incandescent. "It already sings." "Judge Rivera signed the TRO while you were flashing your scar. Harrow can't try a medical end run while we fight. We filed a trafficking suit at 4. I looked at Ezra. He looked at me. For a second, the world took a respectful step back. "You just got yourself fired," Naomi said to him, gleeful and furious and proud. "Northwing's going to say you compromised neutrality." Ezra's mouth twitched. He rolled his shoulders like the weight of a badge he didn't wear had been taken by someone with bigger hands. "Worth it," he said. He smiled then. Small, private. The kind of smile that doesn't use teeth because it doesn't have to. It landed somewhere in my chest and made a home. Behind us, the courthouse doors swung, disgorging statements and the smell of ozone. Somewhere, sirens wrote their thin blue lines into the air. I touched my clavicle through fabric, felt the old seam under my skin, and tried on the word that had been too big for my mouth a year ago. Free. We didn't celebrate. Not yet. We stood on the steps while the city changed an inch in our direction, and the cameras kept blinking like anxious birds. The wind lifted Ezra's hair, and brought me the sea salt edge of the harbor. For a moment the taste of it wasn't memory. It was now. Morning came soft and clean, the kind of light that forgives everything it touches. The hospital roof was empty except for the two of us, a dented bench, and the faint echo of sirens somewhere below. The city stretched out in pale gold, damp air rising from the streets like a sigh. Ezra climbed through the access hatch, holding a paper bag in one hand, and something small wrapped in cloth in the other. He looked better without the weight of command, tired, yes, but lighter. Like the storm inside him had finally found a place to rest. "Naomi says congratulations," he said. Then she said a bunch of legal words that made me want to retire early. I smiled. She's celebrating in her own language. He handed me the cloth bundle. Inside was a pair of gloves, soft black leather, perfectly fitted. When I turned one over, I saw a thin band stitched inside the wrist. A tiny silver clasp caught the sunlight. "It's not a tracker," he said quickly, catching my raised eyebrow. "Custom made." "A reminder." "Of what?" "That you're free." He hesitated, almost shy. "And that you're still you, even when someone tries to put a mark on your skin." I ran a thumb along the seam. The craftsmanship was precise, clean, no ownership, no brand. Just something built to last. "Thank you," I said quietly. He shrugged. The movement casual and too deliberate to be casual at all. "I figured you could use something that stays without trying to hold." The words landed somewhere deep, where old things used to hurt. "Wait here," I said, standing. I dug through my own bag until I found my sewing kit, half empty, thread tangled like memory. With a few careful motions, I took a strip of fabric from the lining of my jacket, and stitched it into the inside of his tactical vest, right over the heart pocket. He looked down. "That's not regulation." "Neither am I," I said. "Consider it a duplicate." "Of what?" "The reminder. Works both ways." For a heartbeat he just stared at me. Then laughed. Soft, low, the kind of laugh that carried sunlight in it. "Without marks?" he asked. "Only coffee and stubbornness," I said. "Good," he replied. "I can live with that." The wind shifted, tugging at the edge of his jacket, at the edge of my shirt. We both looked toward the skyline, hospitals, cranes and rooftops catching the first serious fire of the sun. A city that didn't stop for freedom or loss, but made room for both. Below, an ambulance wailed somewhere in the waking traffic. Life, relentless and ordinary, kept moving. Ezra leaned back against the railing, eyes half closed. "What now?" "Now?" I sipped from the thermos I'd brought. "Tea, terrible as always. We keep showing up. That's all freedom is, really. The right to stay. The right to choose again tomorrow." He nodded, and we stood there, quiet, the wind curling between us like a promise. I looked at the gloves in my hands, the thin leather, the clasp catching the light, and thought about every scar, every fight, every time I'd mistaken survival for living. A mark isn't a scar. It's what you repeat every day. With the one who doesn't make you obey, but simply stays. Somewhere below, the siren faded. The city breathed. And for the first time in years, so did I.